baby, hurry, please.
Who was it that shot them?
It was her grandma.
Do you know why your grandma did this?
Because she was mad at us. She's going crazy.
Ever heard a 911 call so intense that you just can't forget it?
Oh, yeah.
That's what we've got today.
Okay.
A case that starts with a mother just frantic, cry, "Someone shot my baby, hurry please." And get this.
Oh, wow.
The person she's accusing?
Yeah.
The baby's own grandmother. It's a story that pulls you in right away.
It definitely grabs your attention. The emotion in that 911 call is just, it tells you how fast things can go wrong.
Absolutely. We're talking about 6-month-old Myra,
Okay.
the victim, and her grandmother, Mia Desiree Harris, the alleged shooter. Myra's mom, Destiny, was there too.
Oh, wow.
So what we're trying to do today is figure out how this happened.
Right.
Was this a long time coming, or was it completely out of the blue?
Well, right away, Mia's behavior after the shooting is a little concerning. She doesn't stick around. She's driving erratically, and then at the police station, it gets even weirder. She's demanding money, not making much sense, and talking about people being raped and pillaged.
Yeah, it's like she's not even in the same world as what just happened. And remember that line from the 911 call? You don't rape and pillage the earth and think you don't get judged? It's like she's justifying the shooting.
Right. That's what's so interesting and disturbing about this case. Was this a mental break? Or was she trying to get out of trouble? We need to look at the psychology of trauma.
Okay, let's do that. We know trauma can really mess people up.
Right.
But how could it explain what we're seeing with Mia?
Think of trauma like an earthquake.
Okay.
It shakes the foundation of your mind. Sometimes you can see the damage. Other times it's hidden until something sets it off.
So for Mia, could the shooting itself have been the trigger? Or is there more?
There's definitely more. Destiny's account is important here. In the days before the shooting, she describes tension with Mia, accusations, verbal abuse, even physical attacks. Destiny says Mia was convinced that she was a demon.
Wow, that's scary. So how do we connect these accusations to the shooting?
This is where it gets interesting. Have you heard of projection?
I think so.
It's where you take your own bad feelings, like anger, insecurity, and guilt, and put them on someone else.
So instead of dealing with it, they blame someone else.
Exactly. And the stronger those feelings are, the more likely they are to do this. Imagine holding a hot coal, it's burning you, so you throw it at someone else to stop your pain. But now they're hurt. In Mia's case, she might have been projecting her own problems onto Destiny.
That makes sense. Especially with her saying, rape and pillage. It's like she feels violated and wronged by the whole world.
It's a way to not take responsibility.
Right.
And resentment and injustice, whether it's real or not, can be very dangerous.
Dangerous enough to shoot your own grandkid.
Unfortunately, yes. And that brings us to Mia's confession. She admits to shooting Myra, but doesn't call it mercy. She calls it judgment.
And her reason. A strange mix of religion, conspiracy theories, and grudges. She says she was crucified, that it was God's will, and even accuses the government and wealthy families.
It sounds like a jumble of ideas, but if you look closer, you see how mental illness can twist reality.
So is it possible that she truly believed she was doing the right thing? Even if it seems crazy to us.
That's the hard part of this case. Mia's words point to a troubled mind, maybe even a religious delusion.
Okay, what's a religious delusion? How could it affect her actions?
Well, it's complicated. Basically, it's having unshakable beliefs with religious themes that aren't real. For someone with this, these beliefs feel totally real and can control what they do, even if it's harmful.
So for Mia, could her talk about judgment and being crucified be signs of this delusion? Is she justifying what she did through religion?
It's possible, and remember, we're not diagnosing Mia here, but her words and actions make us question her mental state.
And then she brings up the government and rich families. Is this real resentment or delusion?
That's the nuance. Her claims echo real historical trauma about land and oppression, but that doesn't make hurting a child okay. Her pain, even if real, can't justify violence.
So we have this mix of suffering, twisted views, and justifications that don't hold up. How do we balance justice with mental illness? I'm not even sure where to start.
Yeah, it's a tough question. It's something legal systems and society struggle with. How can we hold people accountable, but also recognize that mental illness can change their judgment? And even more importantly, how can we stop this from happening in the first place?
All right, I'm ready to tackle those questions, but first, I think we need to talk about what happened next, the trial and the aftermath. I have a feeling this is where things get even more complicated.
You're right. The legal stuff adds another layer to this already difficult case. And seeing how the system handled Mia's actions might tell us how we deal with mental health and criminal justice.
Let's get into it then. I'm ready to see how this all plays out.
So at the trial, we see how the legal system handles mental illness. Mia's first plea was not guilty by reason of insanity.
That sounds pretty normal for these types of cases, right?
It's a common strategy, but not an easy way out. You need a lot of evidence and expert testimony to prove they didn't know what they were doing was wrong at the time. It's like a puzzle with missing pieces, and some are too messed up to use.
That sounds really tough, especially with all the emotions in this case. Did Mia's lawyers succeed?
Well, here's a twist. She withdrew that plea later.
Whoa, really? What happened? Did they change their plan?
It's hard to say for sure, but this usually happens when the defense realizes they can't convince the jury that the defendant was truly insane.
So did she just plead guilty?
Not really. This is where plea bargains come in. She pleaded guilty to a lesser charge, felonious assault, but the prosecution could still upgrade it to murder if Myra didn't make it.
That's intense. So the final decision depends on Myra's recovery.
Exactly. It's like they're waiting to see what happens to Myra before deciding how much Mia is responsible for.
Wow, that's a lot to take in. Makes you think about how the legal system deals with cases where mental health plays such a big role. Is a plea bargain enough in this situation? Does it seem like a clear-cut solution?
It's a good question, and there's no easy answer. Plea bargains are supposed to make things faster and avoid a trial's uncertainty, but they can leave a lot unresolved in cases like this. Victims and their families might feel like justice wasn't fully served.
It adds to the tragedy. But we can't forget about the human cost. This is a baby who was shot by her grandmother. What about Myra? How is she doing?
That's the good news. She's made an amazing recovery after that terrible injury. And get this, she was even at the trial with her mom.
Wow, that's incredible. To think that she's still here, defying the odds after going through something so awful, it shows how strong people can be, even at such a young age.
Absolutely. Myra being there shows her strength and reminds us that there's hope even after violence.
Her story reminds us to focus on the victims too, not just the person who did it. Their resilience and recovery are important.
That perspective gets lost sometimes in the legal battles and mental health analyses. But the effects of trauma go way beyond just the event itself. They touch families, communities, and future generations.
So how do we stop these tragedies from happening? What can we do, both as individuals and as a society, to address mental health, poverty, and the inequalities that lead to these horrible events?
Those are the questions that keep me up at night. We can't just say this was a one-time thing. Mia's story, while unique, reflects bigger problems we have to face.
Right, when you hear her talk about money problems and resentment toward people she sees as better off, it paints a picture of despair that can come from these inequalities. We can't just ignore that. Her experiences, even if distorted, might be rooted in real social issues.
You got it. And understanding historical trauma is key here. Her claims about the government and the elite connect to a history of broken promises and missed opportunities that have hurt marginalized communities for a long time. It's not about excusing what she did, but about understanding why it happened.
It's like recognizing that mental health is connected to social and economic factors. And when those systems fail people, the consequences can be terrible for everyone involved.
Exactly. This case is so important. It's not just about one crime. It's about bigger questions of mental health, justice, and how our society works.
It's about seeing the warning signs, the cries for help that people miss. It's about making a society where mental health is supported, not stigmatized, where people feel safe to ask for help.
And it's about making sure everyone has access to resources like affordable housing, job training, and mental health care. These shouldn't be privileges, but rights.
Because stopping tragedies like this takes all of us. We have to acknowledge the systems that cause suffering and build a more fair and equal world.
That's why these conversations are so important. We need to keep talking, keep learning, and keep fighting for change.
Before we get to our final thoughts, Mia's sentencing is coming up on October 29th, 2024, just a few days from now. What can we expect to happen?
It's the question on everyone's minds. The judge has to balance the severity of what happened with Mia's mental state. They have to consider punishment and the the possibility of rehabilitation and treatment.
And this is all happening while Myra is still healing and rebuilding her life with her mother.
Exactly. The legal system is just one part of this. The real healing happens outside the courtroom.
So as we wrap up, think about this. What responsibility do we have as individuals and as a community to see when someone is struggling and to step in?
How do we create a safety net that catches people who are falling through the cracks? A system that prevents these crises instead of just reacting to them? It's a big question, but we can't ignore it.
And as we move to our final thoughts, Myra's story, although tragic, isn't unique.
Sadly, these situations where mental illness and violence intersect are all too common. That's why it's so important to continue talking about this, to learn from what happened to Myra, and to work towards a future where these tragedies are rare, not the norm. But before those final thoughts, let's think about what we've talked about. What are your main takeaways?
This whole thing just makes you think, what can we really do to stop this from happening again?
Yeah, it's not enough to just think about it. We have to realize that these things often come from a lot of different issues. Mental illness that isn't treated, not enough resources, and inequalities that make people feel hopeless.
So we can't just look at mental health by itself. We have to fix the social and economic problems that are part of it too.
Right. Poverty, discrimination, and lack of opportunity can really hurt people's mental health. If we want to prevent these tragedies, we need to address those root causes.
So that means fighting for things like affordable housing, good education, job training, and mental health care that everyone can access.
And we need to stop the stigma around mental illness. Create a culture where people can ask for help without feeling judged or ashamed.
And it starts with us too, right? Like, how can we be more aware of what people are going through? How can we offer support without judging?
Those are the questions that can lead to real change. It's about noticing the small signs that someone is struggling, listening without giving advice they didn't ask for, and knowing when to suggest they get professional help.
And we don't have to have all the answers or try to fix everything ourselves. Sometimes the best thing we can do is just be there for someone and listen.
And remember that everyone's experience with mental health is different. What helps one person might not help another.
This whole deep dive has been eye-opening, but also really tough to hear. I guess that's how these stories are, though. They stick with you and make you think differently about the world.
I agree. Myra's story is really sad, but it also shows how strong and hopeful people can be. Even after everything she went through, she's still here trying to live her life.
It's a good thing to remember in all of this. And it shows how strong and loving her mother is, staying with her through it all.
Their bond shows how love can heal and how important it is to support survivors.
As we finish up, I want you to think about this. What will you do to make a difference?
How will you help create a world where tragedies like Myra's don't happen anymore?
Maybe it's volunteering at a mental health organization.
Maybe it's learning about the resources in your community.
Maybe it's just having an honest conversation with a friend or family member who might be having a hard time.
No matter what you do, taking action turns awareness into change.
And that's how we can truly honor Myra's story. Not just with sadness, but with a promise to build a world where every child has the chance to succeed.
Thanks for joining us on this important journey.
Until next time, keep asking questions, keep learning, and keep diving deep.